I have my sandbox project open from the previous presentation, and I modified, I made a couple changes to the file since the last time we saw it. And the only things that I've done at this point is I've added a skybox, and I've added some textures to my terrain so I have a little bit more context and a little bit more reference to the environment that I'm looking at. I still have my reference object that I used as the building to demonstrate the falling spheres and to put them in scale and in context. Other than that, everything else is just as you saw it from the previous presentation. Now, the next step that I want to go to start experimenting with the physics engine inside Unity is I want to download some scripts that I can use to start to control objects inside Unity. Now, I've provided some of these scripts, and I want to point out that I did update these scripts as of July 9th. So if you're not using the most current version of these scripts, make sure that you download the latest version. Because the previous version contained some scripts that were missing some references, and so you may get a compiling error when you try to use the previous version of the scripts. If you're experimenting with those scripts in Unity, you're probably getting an error, and I can explain what's happening a little bit later. So I'm going to download this Marble Scripts zip file. I'm going to right-click and choose to save link as, and I'll save this right to the desktop. I'll choose Save. Once that's done downloading, I'm going to double click on it to unzip it, and at that point I have my Marble Scripts folder that's on my desktop. I'm going to go back to Unity, I'm going to select my Assets folder, and I'm just going to drag the Marble Scripts into the root of my Assets folder. So now inside my Assets folder I have these Marble Scripts, and before I spend too much time tinkering with these scripts, the first thing that I want to do is I want to get rid of the downloaded zip archive and the unzipped version of that folder, because I now have that as an asset within my project. So I'm going to double click the scripts folder, and I want to talk to you a little bit about some of these scripts that we have here. We're going to experiment with the Force01 script, now we're going to move to Force2 and Force3, and eventually we'll arrive at this basic Marble script and apply that to our object. Now if you remember from the previous presentation, I have my scene set up so that when I hit play, I have these two sphere objects that fall to the ground. And the reason that that's happening is because I created a game object, and this time around I'll just create a cube. I've moved that cube up in the air, and with that cube selected, or that object selected, I chose Components, Physics, and I've added a rigid body to that object. The minute we do that, when we hit the play button, we now have these objects being influenced by the physics engine inside Unity. Okay, so I'll turn my simulation off. I'm going to get rid of the cube that I just created. And so I have two spheres in this space that I want to start to play around with, and for the sake of the demo, I'm going to get rid of the big sphere. Okay, so I'll get rid of that. So now I only have one sphere left. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just so that we can see it a little bit more clearly. It's a little bit bigger, and I also want to take my camera and I'm going to move this a little bit closer so that we can see when it hits the ground. So I'll hit the play button just so you see what I have here. Eventually I have this sphere that falls into the scene. It drops onto the ground and just kind of sits there. It might roll around a little bit because I've modified the terrain just a bit. I'm going to make sure that I turn my play button off. Now, before I even explain what's going on with these scripts, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click inside the Marble scripts, and I'm going to take that Force1 script and I'll drag and drop that onto my sphere object. So what I've done, because I have a rigid body, I can add dynamic forces to my sphere, and the way that I have this configured, we'll hit the play button, is the sphere is falling just the way that it did before. Now if I start to use the A and D keys, you can see that I can start to influence or push this object left and right. If I use the W and S keys, I can push it into the foreground and into the background. I'm looking down the Z axis roughly inside my my environment, and the way that I have these keys mapped is that I'm applying a force, or I'm adding a force along the X axis when we use the A or the D keys. Okay, so this is a global axis, and so we're pushing it in the direction of the global axes along the X value when we use the A and the D keys. When we use W and S, we're pushing it, we're adding force along the Z-axis. Now the way that the keys work inside Unity, at least when it comes to the character controllers, which are the A, W, S, D, or the arrow keys on the keyboard, is that we're either adding a positive force or we're adding a negative force depending on which key that we're pressing. So when I hit the W key, we're adding a positive force along the Z-axis, and when I hold down the S key, I'm applying a negative force down the Z-axis. So you can see that we can get that sphere to move around. I'm just going to hit Command P to turn that simulation off, and I'll hit Command P again to reset it. So apply the Force01 script to your marble. Make sure that you can see, excuse me, apply the Force01 script to your sphere that has a rigid body applied on it. Make sure that your main camera can see that object, and just experiment with controlling that object, moving it around and kind of pushing it and pulling it along the X and the Z axis. Now you might discover that as you're playing with this, if you hit the fire button or the left mouse button, we can actually get that sphere to rise up off the ground. That's because in addition to the AWSD keys, I've mapped the fire or the fire 1 key or the left mouse button to apply a force along the Y axis. And we'll take a look at this script and take a peek under the hood and see what's going on with this script. It's fairly simple, this script, but immediately we can get some pretty complex controls. So play around with that Force01 script, get it applied to your sphere, and continue to experiment with this scene and play around and gain some control over that. And we'll push this concept forward in the next presentation.